As we reflect on and celebrate the legacy of Dr. King, I believe that many Black Americans are exceedingly grateful for his work and the work of brave men and women who risked everything to take part in the civil rights movement. I marvel over the integrated audience before me and am astounded that there was a time that this gathering of people was not normal. We would be remiss to disregard the many ways that relationships between Black communities and the rest of the world have changed since that time, and we celebrate this fact. Yet even as we celebrate, we look at the events of 2015 and wonder if we have not been transplanted back into the time when Black men and women were under constant attack, reminiscent of an America that has not yet heard the words of Dr. King. There's a quote from chapter 1 of Dr. King's book, Why We Can't Wait, that I believe aptly describes, in many ways, the hearts of many Black Americans right now. This is Dr. King describing the thoughts of Black Americans in 1963 as they fought for liberation, exactly 100 years after the Emancipation Proclamation. And the quote reads, "This was his, the Negroes, recognition that 100 years had passed since emancipation with no profound effect on his plight." If this quote were written today, it would say something like this: "This was their, Black America's, recognition that over 150 years had passed since the emancipation and almost 50 years since the civil rights movement with no profound effect on their plight." When we read scripture, there is a beautiful discipline, a holy and sacred discipline that you find from Genesis all the way to Revelations. Not only do people who worship God engage in this discipline, but God himself does this. The discipline that I am referring to is the discipline of lament. This is the dictionary definition of lament: to feel, show, or express grief, sorrow, or regret, to mourn deeply. There are a number of reasons why people tend to have a very visceral and aggressive response to Black Lives Matter. Race is notoriously hard to talk about. Race is a touchy subject for America. We live in a racialized society. And by racialized society, I mean that race is a determining factor for a number of things. I mean that when someone looks at you, they use your race to determine things about you without doing the work to find out if those things are true or fair. All of those factors lend themselves to the conversation surrounding Black Lives Matter. However, I believe that one of the most pervasive reasons that people want to move away from the Black Lives Matter movement is because there's a fundamental misunderstanding of what this movement is. Historically and presently, communities of color, Black communities in particular, have a strained and complicated relationship with authority and established systems. The deaths of men like Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, and Freddie Gray have sparked fear and outrage in the Black community. Out of this lament, the Black Lives Matter arose to bring awareness to instances of police profiling and brutality, and to assert that Black lives matter. So what the Black Lives Matter movement is not. Black Lives Matter isn't about Black people longing to be treated special. It is not about the Black community believing that they can do whatever they want and get away with it because of slavery. The Black Lives Matter movement is not a movement of hate. At its core, the Black Lives Matter movement is not an ongoing anti-police, anti-authority rhetoric. And what I really believe needs to be stated is that the Black Lives Matter movement is not an anti-white movement. The Black Lives Matter movement is not an indictment against white ethnic identity, nor does it imply that other lives do not matter. The Black Lives Matter movement addresses many types of systematic injustices that disproportionately affect Black communities, but specifically comes out of the extrajudicial killings of Black men and women. Black Lives Matter intends to undermine the narrative that Black people are inherently dangerous or demonic, if we remember the words of Darren Wilson, the man who killed Mike Brown. Now, if you listen closely, when you engage with Black men and women, when you listen to their stories, you get a sense that actually the Black Lives Matter movement is a movement of lament. It is a movement of deep sorrow and mourning. It is the Black community declaring, it is me declaring that I will not hide my sadness anymore. I will not be quiet anymore. I'm not going to just suck it up anymore. I will no longer save my mourning just for the moments when I'm around Black friends and family. No, now I will grieve in front of the world, and the world will know. This world, this country, the American church will hear the stories of men and women who left their house at the beginning of the day and never came home. Because of the Black Lives Matter movement, we must listen to and pay attention to the stories of family and friends who expected to spend Thanksgiving with Laquan McDonald, who expected to spend Christmas with Tamir Rice, who would have loved to celebrate New Year's with Michael Brown, but could not. At the heart of this movement, the Black community is crying out, "How long, America? How long must Black men and women be tried, convicted, and executed on the street? How many more parents will send their 17-year-old son off to the store, expecting him to return home within the hour, only to get a phone call in the early hours of the morning that he had been shot and killed by a man who followed him because he thought he looked suspicious, even though Trayvon was only carrying Arizona iced tea and a pack of Skittles, shot by a man who followed and confronted him, even when the police told him not to? How long will I have to log onto Twitter only to see that 5 Black people were shot at a protest by white supremacists, that 9 Black men and women were shot to death during a prayer meeting in Charleston, that in the wake of those shootings, Black churches were burned, or that Black students at Mizzou couldn't even go to class because they felt unsafe? How long? How many more names will be added to this list? Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Eric Garner, Sandra Bland, Lennon Lacey, Walter Scott, Kendrick Johnson, Reverend Clementa Pinckney, Tawanda Sanders, Sharonda Singleton, Cynthia Hurd, D. Payne Doctor, Ethel Lance, Susie Jackson, Myra Thompson, Daniel Simmons, Laquan McDonald, Renisha McBride, Rakia Boyd, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray. Are you tired of me reading names yet? I imagine after the 4th or 5th name, you were thinking, okay, we get the point. You can stop now. Weren't you tired of hearing that many names? Wasn't it enough at some point? And this is the point of the Black Lives Matter movement. When will enough be enough? How much longer, how many more? Will it be my brother or sister, my niece or my nephew, my friend or my pastor? Will it be me? This is the plight of the Black community right now. This is what we are lamenting. This is what we are mourning. We are mourning because these lives matter, even though they were treated as if they did not. My people are tired and we are hurting. We are grieving. If you are opposed to Black Lives Matter, I think it's because you have misunderstood our heart and our anger. My counselor says this to me a lot. Yes, I have a counselor. She's wonderful. I recommend that everyone get one. She says that anger is a secondary emotion. She says, Tiya, you're angry because you were hurt or sad first. And this is true of the Black Lives Matter movement. If you say all lives matter, I think you are responding to something that we have not said or implied. I think the All Lives Matter movement arose because they read Black Lives Matter as only Black Lives Matter, when in reality, what we are saying is that Black Lives Matter too. Even as we celebrate Dr. King today, I invite us to lament. I invite us to listen to stories and weep alongside of and for the Black community at this critical moment in history. I invite you to ponder what you would feel if it was your family or your friends or yourself constantly under attack. Will we engage in sorrow as a collective, as a people living out the hopes and dreams of men and women who risked everything for us to be here in this room together? It is imperative that we do. Lives are at stake. Freedom is at stake. We risk way more than we are actually willing to pay if we do not act now. My friends, this is why we can't wait.